Hello, welcome to the Nexus Podcast. Here, we're all about connecting anyone and everyone with our environment. We'll aim to do this through sharing knowledge and discussing various topics that show people how they can be better connected to nature and the world we live in. At the end of each episode, we'll also provide some actionable steps that anybody can take to help make our world a better place. I believe that the impact of everyday people can be profound if we all act and strive to leave the world in a better way than we found it, especially our environment. We'll try to keep things enlightening, informative, and educational. I'd love anyone and everyone to be able to listen and enjoy tuning in. I hope we can be the nexus between you and the beautiful world we live in and so rely on. This is Jessica York, bringing you another episode of Nature's Nexus. Let's go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Nature's Nexus podcast. On today's episode, we have a guest who is Dr. Steve Debus, and Steve is will you say you're an ornithologist, Steve? Somebody who specialises in studying birds?
Yeah, that'd be the correct label. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So today we're going to talk about Steve's work and, sort of the role of Steve does a lot of work with birds of prey and the role of them in the environment. So welcome, Steve. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So before we get into it, Steve, I like to ask my guests the same two questions at the start of each episode. And the first one is, what is it you love most about our natural world?
Well, I think it's the fact that the ecosystem services provided by a healthy biosphere totally underpin humanity's well-being. And there's also wonder in how everything is connected and how being immersed in nature is so uplifting. We know that being connected with nature is good for us mentally and physically.
Yeah, I love that answer. And it is so true. It's really wonderful how everything is connected. I think that's really what I'm trying to drive home with this whole podcast and everything in this platform is how it's all connected and how people can get connected, even ways they're not aware of, like with the ecosystem and everything. It's just, it's amazing. So the second question is, how do you get connected to nature, or when do you feel the most connected?
Well, I think for me, it's being out in the bush and observing what the birds and other animals are doing and listening to and interpreting the soundscape. It's also just being able to see and hear what's going on in a native garden in suburbia. Because I can look out the window now, or the kitchen window or whatever, and there's stuff going on in the backyard because we've got eucalyptus and wattles things and some nectar-bearing plants. And, it gets visited by native birds.
Yeah, for sure. It's really beautiful when you could just listen to all the sounds. And I think when you really tune in, you probably hear more than if you just weren't paying attention.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. So for those of you who might not be familiar with Steve or his work, Steve currently, or since 2017, his main job has been on contract to the New South Wales Local Land Services, conducting birds of prey monitoring projects for the Northern Tablelands area. So that involves searching for nests of the 3 focal threatened species, which are little eagles, white-bellied sea eagle, and square-tailed kite, and monitoring their breeding success. Steve also tries to keep track of spotted harriers, black falcons, and barking owls as well. He's also an adjunct, which is an honorary research associate in zoology at the University of New England in Armidale, where his main roles are co-supervising postgrad students doing raptor projects and publishing the results of his research. Steve also does a bit of consulting involving field surveys for raptors and owls, and formerly for swift parrots, regent honeyeaters, and other woodland birds, or advising on whether certain habitat areas, usually for biodiversity stewardship sites, would support these species. Through UNE, Steve did a Master's in Science on owls and a PhD and postdoc on declining woodland birds. But his first postgrad thesis was a diploma in natural resources project on little eagles. So following studies on most of our 10 owls and about half of our 24 diurnal raptors, Steve has done field guides to the raptors and owls and books on eagles and falcons. So before, Steve, when you mentioned that you do work with the local land services on the white-bellied sea eagles, do we get them up in the Northern Tablelands?
Yes, we do. We get them nesting on big reservoirs like Malpas Dam and so on, and places like Little Langloffin Lagoon and other big water bodies. It's funny that I had one person decline permission to search on their land because they didn't think sea eagles belonged on the tablelands, but
Yeah.
maybe sea eagle is a misnomer, because overseas, some of these similar species are called fish eagles, and I've actually had little white-bellied sea eagles nesting as far west as on the Warrego near Burke, in the Murray-Darling Basin. So they're all through the big inland rivers and so on, as well as on the coast.
Yeah, so basically they could habituate an area that's just got a large enough body of water with enough fish that they like to eat.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I mean, it's like
Yeah.
pelicans. Pelicans are more known as a coastal bird, but we see them inland at big dams or big bodies of water. Yeah.
Yep. Sure. Yeah.
So what got you into first studying birds and raptors, Steve? Was there a defining moment when you felt a deep connection to these birds of prey, or where did it all start?
Yeah, I think it goes back to when I was in primary school. When I was, I guess, in about year one, the family, or the end of year one, I think, family moved from Sydney to a small town in the New South Wales Riverina, and there's a big contrast in the bird life. I mean, from sort of suburban Sydney to the country in those days, particularly, there hadn't been a real lot of clearing then either, and there was some, obviously, but there was close encounters with wedge-tailed eagles. I mean, you could see big wedgies close up. And of course, in those days, in the 60s, wedge-tails were shot and hung on farm fences, which is, I guess, pretty graphic, and it sort of made me feel sympathetic, and I thought it was sort of unjust that these birds were killed in the numbers they were. Sometimes you could see 20 or more hung wingtip along the fence. And also, early on, I was still in primary school, I found an injured barn owl that didn't survive, actually died while I was holding it, but yeah, so those sort of deep connections early on, I think, sort of paved the way, and I've been interested in birds of prey ever since.
Yeah, awesome. And you think that conflict with people with them killing the wedgies is really around like the livestock, isn't it? Is it because they kill the lambs?
Yeah, well, they were thought to be significant predators of lambs, but when the CSIRO, as it happened, also did studies in the 60s, but it wasn't published, I think until about 1970 or so, that showed that wedgies are mostly taking the dead and dying lambs, and it's mostly an issue of lamb, nutrition and so on, and shelter, and wedgies weren't killing the proportion they were thought to be. There were much more serious and important reasons for lambs dying, and when people go around the paddocks and see a wedgie feeding on a dead lamb, they think it killed it, but more often than not, it's just scavenging on the dead ones. But yeah, so that was a factor in it, as well as I learnt about wedgies weren't as bad as they were thought to be.
Yeah, and that's a really sad misunderstanding, with people not understanding what's actually going on. In a way, they're just sort of cleaning up.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is probably what they naturally do in the environment, right? Like, does that then leads into like what raptors can tell us about the health of the land and things that we might otherwise miss?
Yeah, I think so, because they are cleaning up the carcasses and so on as well. I mean, especially young wedgies depend a lot on carrion when they're learning to hunt in their first year or two, and they can take live kangaroos as well as dead ones too. So they're pretty versatile. But yeah, so I guess does that lead into the question about raptors being sort of indicator species and so on? Yeah, what they can tell us about the health of the land. So raptors can flag many problems in the environment, through either their presence or their absence, or the sort of densities they live at, and their breeding success is a good measure of what's going on, and their population trends, of course. And these can all indicate things like habitat degradation, changes in prey populations, and biodiversity in general, ecosystem function, and they alert us to chemical contamination that can harm human health as well. Like, I mean, some of the chemicals that are affecting raptors are issues for humans, like cancer and other health issues. And if I could say that, for instance, an absence of raptors from an area or declines in density or breeding success indicate that we're not managing the environment as well as we should. Chemical contamination can show up through, sort of declines in raptor breeding success, because it affects their egg shells and so on, or heavy metals like lead or mercury can be found in their feathers or their bodies if they're analysed. And you can see sometimes symptoms of anticoagulant poisoning, that's that anti-clotting poisons, birds affected like that can be lethargic and have uncontrolled bleeding, including internally if they're examined, live or dead raptors. Raptors acquire these chemicals through eating contaminated prey, which is secondary poisoning, because eagles could eat rabbits poisoned with pindone, which is an anticoagulant, or owls eating rodents that have been eating rat or mouse baits and being poisoned. They're easy to catch before they die, so raptors pick them off and accumulate doses of these chemicals and end up dying themselves. I think the most dramatic example of the effect of habitat clearance and so on is the endemic and nationally endangered red goshawk. It's an old growth, tall woodland and forest species, the tropics and subtropics. It needs that sort of open. It's a long-winged raptor that hunts in forest or woodland. It needs the sort of special structure of habitat, and its nests sort of above 18 meters above the ground kind of thing. At first European colonisation around 1790, it was found south of Sydney. There was one nailed to a settler's hut and illustrated by the Port Jackson painter around 1790. By the 1990s, it was basically gone from New South Wales. 2010s, it had disappeared from southeast Queensland. By 2020, it had retreated to the base of Cape York Peninsula. And in the last couple of years, I've seen a couple of maps published of the extent of habitat clearance and degradation, comparing sort of pre-1770 with 2020, and it's a perfect fit for the red goshawk's current distribution. So, it's functionally extinct over most of its former range in eastern Australia, coinciding with that map of habitat degradation and clearance. And although it still occurs in the Northern Territory and the Kimberley, it was probably also affected by DDT up to the late 1980s, but we don't have enough data to know that, because that investigation was based on comparing eggshell thickness, pre-DDT and since, and there just weren't enough nests even known for the red goshawk in recent years.
And DDT was a chemical that made its way up through into its food, didn't it? Like, was DDT a chemical?
That was the classic bioaccumulation story of pesticides, the persistent pesticides that the more birds or whatever that these raptors eat, the more DDT just accumulates in their body, and the impact on raptors was mainly causing thin-shelled eggs that couldn't hatch. That basically got crushed under the inside.
Oh, okay.
No, they basically got crushed under the incubating female. She'd try to sit on the eggs, and they'd be so brittle they'd break, and then she might sort of eat the yolk and dispose of the eggs or whatever. So that was a serious problem up until the late 80s when it was banned.
Yeah. And DDT is not really a chemical we use anymore, is it?
It's been phased out. It was banned. It's still used in some tropical countries, but it was banned in Australia in about 1987, I think. And in Europe and North America before that, I think. But it's basically not used anymore, at least in Australian agriculture.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought I had memories of learning about it back when I was at university, and about the biological impacts of it working its way up through the food chain and those devastating effects it has. Yeah.
Because it was so persistent, it doesn't break down in the environment very quickly.
Yeah, it just accumulates. Yeah, and then how do they get, like you mentioned, the heavy metals were also a bit of a threat, causing, declines in raptor breeding success. But where do the heavy metals come into it?
Oh, well, mercury gets into the environment in various ways, as an industrial pollutant and so on. Paper manufacturing is one source I can think of for mercury, but there'd be plenty of others, chemicals like PCBs and so on as well. But lead gets into the environment. It used to get into the environment through leaded petrol, but also just lead ammunition, carcasses, animals that are shot with lead ammunition and then just left in the environment, like kangaroo dumps and so on. They take the cuts for the pet food trade or human consumption or whatever and leave the rest, and the eagles come down and feed on on the offal and so on, and ingest the lead.
As in they ingest the bullet, or the bullet leaches into the meat?
Oh, well, it's a bit of both, because the lead shot or lead bullets just fragment a lot when they there's a lot of lead dust. I've seen there's a paper recently that showed that an animal shot with lead, there's quite a spread of lead fragments and powder and so on over the animal. If a rabbit is shot with a lead bullet, basically the entire carcass is covered in lead dust. And a larger animal shot with a lead bullet, the bullet can fragment, so that and of course lead shotgun pellets, they can be just ingested as they are. If a raptor is eating a carcass that's shot with shotgun pellets, it could easily ingest the individual pellets, particularly in small sized shot. So yeah, that's an important way that it gets into the food chain.
Well, that's pretty amazing. So I wonder if many hunters don't realise the impact that that's having. Like, they probably think, they're leaving the carcass there and that's what they're going to feed the wildlife. But in reality, no. Are you saying maybe they should be trying to cut out the remnants of the bullet to avoid that lead leaching, so to make it safer?
There are alternatives now to lead shot, like the stainless steel shot for shotguns, and they're experimenting. They've done some work on copper bullets instead of lead bullets.
So stainless steel or copper bullets?
Stainless steel shot for shotguns, the little pellets can be stainless steel, and for rifle ammo or whatever, copper bullets can replace lead, and I think they're certainly available in some ammunition outlets. It's just a matter of, I think, enough people realising that they can avoid lead shot if they go looking for the alternatives. I think the other part of it is if animals are shot with lead ammo, then they shouldn't be left lying around in the environment. They should be disposed of somehow so that scavengers can't get at them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had no idea about that. I guess people wouldn't know unless they're reading the current literature.
Well, yeah, look, we're hoping it's getting out there. There was a paper in Wildlife Research, but who reads academic journals other than scientists, I suppose, but it's got to get out there. It's got to get out there, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, okay. So what are some of the other, what are the biggest threats to raptors right now, and then what can be done about that?
Well, the main ones have sort of always been loss of habitat, loss of forest and woodland particularly, and disturbance to nest sites. Raptors can be pretty easily put off nesting, if their nests are subjected to human disturbance. And nowadays that even includes photographers that are not sort of aware of the fact that, a raptor off the nest while they're trying to photograph it is not good for the eggs or chicks. But yeah, habitat loss is affecting the species that depend on forest or woodland. And I've had nesting little eagles, displaced by habitat clearance and expanding rural residential development. Even loss of mature paddock trees and hollow trees on farms. It means loss of nest sites for some raptors and owls that can otherwise coexist with agriculture, and they're eating pest species as well, so like rabbits and rats and mice and so on. And
that's a natural way to control pest species.
Yeah, so habitat loss is having a direct effect on raptor population levels, and that's measured. It can be it's seen in population declines at national or state level over the last few decades. We've had a few more listed as vulnerable, and the national atlas schemes that have been monitoring bird populations have shown that most of the raptor species have declined. In the sort of 20 years up to 2006 when it was last published. There's not many that are actually holding their own or increasing. They're mostly declining. Some of the other we've mentioned threats like pesticides, and nowadays a big issue is these highly toxic second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. The modern rat poisons that are freely available but are devastating for raptor and owl populations.
Because they eat the poison rat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're eating the poisoned rats and mice, and then accumulating a dose of these things. And ironically, one of the worst ones, the brand name is Talon.
Oh,
It might get the rats and mice, but it also gets the birds of prey and owls.
yeah, right.
We mentioned lead poisoning, partly from carcasses, shot with lead ammo. Raptors have a number of other issues like getting hit by vehicles. Now, especially the ones that scavenge on roadkill, but any raptors are, can come to grief by vehicles. Colliding with barbed wire fences is a fairly big one.
Yeah, and then they get
And
tangled
power
up.
lines.
They get tangled up then.
Yeah,
Like
they
in there.
when they're chasing prey or something, or at night the owls can't see them well. It's hard for raptors and owls to see a horizontal wire against the landscape. They're at that level where if the raptor is coming down at a prey item,
At speed.
it'll hit the fence, and if it's barbed, they get snagged, they get tangled up, and can hang there for days before they die. Even rescued ones often don't survive well if they've been hanging on a barbed wire fence for and it tears up their wings, their muscle and so on, so that they may not recover anyway, sufficiently to be released.
Yeah.
Power lines, they can collide with power lines. There's so many power lines traversing the landscape these days, and the larger and agile species like eagles, particularly, but others too, can get electrocuted on power poles when their wings connect in an earth element and the live wires on the power pole. They get electrocuted, and of course the big ones particularly also do come to grief on wind turbines, wind farm turbine blades. So there's a collision rate with them because the birds don't see the turbine blades coming down at them. If they're focused on something below them or ahead of them and they fly through the rotor swept zone, they're not going to see a huge turbine blade. The tips can be travelling at 300 kilometres an hour. So
yeah. So which birds have you noticed? Have you noticed specific species that are prone to getting?
we know. Yeah, it's mostly wedge-tailed eagles and a few sea eagles because they're that size. But I mean,
and they fly at that height.
Yeah, well, I mean, they all fly at the rotor swept zone because when they're soaring, I mean, raptors go way up above turbine height as well. I mean, the turbines might be reaching, what are the latest ones? They've got blades of about 100 metres or something. But so you might be looking at the tower, and the blade span might be getting up to about 300 metres, but that's nothing to raptors that can soar, 1,000 metres or 2,000 metres or something. But but yeah, it's there's cases of little eagles and black falcons and others, kestrels, brown falcons. They're all a bit at risk, but the larger and less agile ones are the ones that are affected the most. Well, some measures that could help to protect raptors. Well, I mean, the obvious one, I suppose, is avoid clearing remnant woodland with large trees and hollows, and to protect those remnants. Avoiding disturbance to nesting raptors and owls, so giving them space around their nests, their occupied nests. Not going too close because they can be pretty shy at the nests and tend to stay away when people are near them. Avoiding using barbed wire on fences if possible, or putting the barbed strand below the top strand, or making the top strand visible with things like electric fencing tape and so on, so that raptors can see the top strand.
Yeah.
Being wildlife aware when driving and moving carcasses off roads if it's safe to do so. I mean, I drag roo carcasses and so on off the road if I can safely, if they're fresh and they're not too gory or smelly. Avoiding or using alternatives to pindone and the second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, and disposing of poison carcasses. I mean, there are certainly alternatives to these modern chemicals. There's quite a lot on the web now about alternatives to poisoning your raptors and owls that eat rats and mice and rabbits. Yeah, we mentioned the alternatives to lead ammo like stainless steel shot or copper bullets. And removing livestock carrion and minimising grain spillages around farms or during transport, because that feeds crows and rodents and so on that either interfere with nesting raptors, the crows and ravens do, or rodents tend to get poisoned. So minimising the need for poisoning or having carcasses lying around would be a good thing.
Yeah, just on that point, Steve, how do the ravens affect the nesting raptors?
Oh, the smaller raptors, little eagles. I've had ravens raiding black falcon nests and taking the eggs and so on, and fighting with black falcons and excluding them from nest sites or nesting trees. And little eagles, I've had ravens cause little eagles to shift their nest site. If the ravens nest in the same tree or nearby, they'll harass the eagles and drive them away. And we've, of course, the thing is, we've made things much better for crows than ravens. Their population is much larger now than it would have been in the past because we provide so much food for them. Livestock carrion, roadkill, spilled grain, all that sort of thing. So yeah, they have a negative impact on nesting birds of prey.
Yeah, okay.
But through their harassment and competition for nest sites and so on, and and reconnecting the landscape, with windbreaks and corridors of local native trees and shrubs. Because apart from giving woodland raptors a way of living in and moving around the landscape, it's also a carbon sink in times of climate change, and also taking action against climate change. And as far as wind farms go, it should be a matter of better planning and siting of wind farms and renewables before they're put in, to avoid biodiversity impacts like hotspots and so on.
And I guess the challenge with wind farms is they're going up on top of high hills, which is probably where a lot of raptors are, isn't it?
Yeah, that's where the strong winds are, but also there's emerging sort of camera based technologies that can prevent or mitigate raptor strike. There's one method is to identifying raptor hotspots in the planning phase to enable avoidance in the first place, and the other camera technology is recognizing early smart cameras up at turbines that can recognize raptor silhouettes and temporarily shut down a turbine if a raptor approaches within a kilometre, within 1K, and that only needs to be in, for the time that the raptor's nearby. So they've found that there's not much power outage, like it's about 1% or something of power outage if one turbine is temporarily shut down by the smart camera system while the raptor's nearby. And that's had a dramatic effect on wedgie deaths in Tasmania, where they're actually listed as endangered. The Tasmanian wedgetail's endangered, and they've managed to have a positive impact, reducing mortalities at wind farms by engaging these camera systems.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, so the cameras just detect the raptor flying in and they sort of stop, and then once it doesn't detect the motion anymore, it restarts itself.
I think that's the idea.
It's pretty impressive the camera can, detect them from that far away.
It's smart cameras with it's built in sort of in artificial intelligence that can recognise the silhouettes. If it's got an inbuilt library of photographs of the raptors, it can match them and shut the turbines down.
Wow.
Yeah. So the first method is using cameras to identify raptor hotspots in the planning phase to sort of try to avoid raptor hotspots in the first place. And the second one is to recognise the raptor silhouettes and temporarily shut off a turbine if a raptor approaches within a kilometre, and it minimises the power outage, by just sort of having one turbine shut down for the time that the raptor is within range.
So with these
Sorry.
So with these cameras, they're smart cameras that are up on the turbines. Are they like up on the pole of the turbine?
The ones that are shutting it down are they're placed so that they're at the turbine sites, and
and then the ones in the monitoring phase before you put the turbines in, are they cameras that you would put up on like a big met mast pole, and they sort of they're just like motion activated cameras that
were monitoring? I think they're probably time lapse. They're probably monitoring type cameras up on a pole or something that can just get a measure of raptor activity in the area.
Yeah,
and that can.
And you just have to have them up at various heights to detect how high they're flying, or?
Oh, within the landscape, I think there's sort of a landscape measure of raptor activity at particular sites. I'm not up on the full methodology there, but yeah, they're designed to identify where different levels of raptor or other bird can be other birds too, because other birds like big birds like brolgas and things can be at risk as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, they just can get a measure of bird activity. Yeah.
So basically, there sort of needs to be better planning.
Yep, I think so. Yeah.
So what's this greater impact that, how is climate change and habitat loss affecting raptors in Australia at a larger scale? And, are there any warning signs we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I think at the moment, the things that I've noticed are sort of storms, the effect of, increasingly intense storms and so on, blowing active nests out of trees. And, that destroys eggs or chicks in the process, or tosses out fledglings before they can fly, where they're then vulnerable to predators. I've had cases of that happening with square-tailed kites, little eagles and black falcons nests. I haven't got much data, but it's possible that global warming is encouraging little eagles to breed a little earlier in the season than they used to, although so far my sample size is one nest over 3 years.
And could that is that a bad thing that they're nesting earlier than usual?
It might depend on how it's affecting the food supply. There's a bit of thought that nesting earlier is a bit advantageous if it does lead to better fledging success, but they're just not really sure about that impact. There's for the few species that are still sort of not declining or anything, there's a couple like the Pacific baza, they're actually moving south or extending their breeding range further south with climate change, but they're a tropical and subtropical raptor that's probably finding things improving a bit for them.
Yeah, so they in southern range because the climate's better suited in wider areas now.
Yeah, in southern, they're moving south from sort of Sydney to southern New South Wales, probably getting close to the Victorian border by now. I suspect climate change in that case is probably favouring their prey, like tree frogs and insects and so on that they feed on.
Oh, okay.
Probably helped a bit by a warming climate. Yeah, so that they can track their sort of prey activity south. Seasons might be better for insects, in a warming world, or some insects anyway.
Yeah. So what role do these birds play then in keeping our ecosystems balanced, and what will happen if we lose them? Yeah,
well, apex predators like raptors do exert a sort of top-down effect through the food chain, helping to control or smooth out, fluctuations in animal populations, and they also maintain the genetic health of prey animals through natural selection by taking out the sort of sick or weak and so on. And some of them remove carrion from the landscape that would otherwise be a source of diseases and pests. And their loss can mean a sort of cascading increase in other species down the food chain, including sort of lower level predators like nest predators of small birds and herbivores like some raptors take cormorants or crows that take nestlings of woodland birds, and other raptors prey on things like rodents and rabbits. And an example of natural selection is raptors taking that sort of odd-looking prey, like colour mutations, or that depart from sort of normal camouflage colours or behaviour that makes them more vulnerable to attack. And that's where the poison prey animals come in. They're easy targets while they're staggering around and behaving abnormally and so on.
Yeah.
So that's sort of one of the roles of raptors, is to sort of take out the odd ones that are seem to be not as fit as they should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some evidence that encouraging some raptors and owls by installing hunting perches and nest boxes in or around crop fields can reduce the impact of rodents on crops, and that can decrease the need for rodenticides if the raptors or the owls are preying on the rodents. And I mentioned, some of them can take birds that are having a negative impact, like increasing birds that we've caused to increase, like currawongs and crows and so on. Raptors can prey on them, and they're the birds that are preying on the nests of our declining woodland birds. So, yeah, there sort of effects down the food chain if you lose the raptors. And things like currawongs have got a bit of a free run at the moment partly because we grow their winter food sources in the form of exotic berry-bearing shrubs, but we're also, removing some of the predators that would take them out.
Yeah. So they really do help keep everything in check and keep everything balanced. Yeah. Sounds like they're very crucial. And I've heard some fascinating stories about the way the different birds hunt and things they do. And I know that there was a story about, firehawks in northern Australia, which, they're birds that essentially they spread fire to hunt, don't they? And then, the fire and the smoke flushes out their prey, which is insects or small birds, I think, for them to eat.
Yeah, and reptiles.
And reptiles, yeah. It's so clever how they do that. Are there, other remarkable raptor behaviours that most people don't know about and how they hunt?
Well, one of the ones that I was involved in to some extent was our own endemic black-breasted buzzard. It doesn't occur anywhere else but Australia. It uses stone tools to break the eggs of large ground nesting birds like emus, so they can feed on the contents of the eggs. They find a stone and carry it to the emu nest, and then they stand on the ground beside the eggs and hold the stone up high in their beak and throw it down hard at the egg and then crack it, and then they can get at the eggs. There's only one other bird that does that in Africa. The Egyptian vulture does that with ostrich eggs. Our buzzard is pretty unique. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that they both have that adaptation to do that when they're on completely different continents.
Yeah, and fairly unrelated to, they're not closely related, vultures and our endemic hawks.
Yeah. Just more evidence of animals being clever and using tools. It's always cool to learn about. And with the hawks, do you know how they spread fire? That's just when there's obviously a natural fire's already started. They must just pick up a stick and on fire and drop it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a person really did some research on that to show that it's actually deliberate action. They'll come to a fire, pick up a burning ember like a stick or something in their foot, and then carry it and then drop it, in a fresh unburnt area ahead of the fire front and start a new fire. It causes a bit of grief for the people trying to control the fire, actually, because the hawks are taking the fire one step ahead of them. But of course, the Aboriginals knew about this, for a long time, and for a while there, Europeans didn't really believe it was deliberate. But that recent research suggests that the black kites and whistling kites and brown falcons know what they're doing and do it deliberately. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's very clever. So you've studied birds for a long time. So is there a behaviour or adaptation that still amazes you today?
Well, with the new technology like satellite telemetry, we now know that some of our raptors move across the continent. Like little eagles in Canberra, the breeding birds migrate for the winter up to the top end of the Northern Territory or Gulf of Carpentaria, base of Cape York Peninsula for the winter, and then come back to the same nesting territory. They do that up and back each year, and there was one bird reached 8,000 meters altitude in Queensland while it was heading there. Yeah, there's other cases, juvenile wedgetail going from, this is soon after it became independent, it went up to Kimberley via Uluru, and then about a year later it was back, near its natal territory, looking for a territory near where it was raised. And now square-tail kites. So there was one went from Adelaide, a juvenile. This is certain when it became independent. It went from its nest near Adelaide up to the Kimberley, straight across the centre of Australia up to the Kimberley. And a band record shows that a brown falcon did that from South Australia up to the Kimberley as well. So and we had band returns on seagulls. The sea eagle went from South Australia to Queensland, but if it went via the coast, that was 3,000 kilometres.
Yeah, wow, that's such long ways. And for people who might not be familiar with Australia's landscape, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's approximately 2,000 to 4,000 kilometres or 1,200 to 2,500 miles. Those journeys, isn't it? One way.
Yeah, the one that went. The one that went from Canberra to Daly Waters in the Northern Territory. I think its track was 3,300 or something. K. Kilometres.
Wow, and it's such a long way for little birds to go.
Yeah, but we also have Siberian peregrine falcons migrating from the northern hemisphere in that winter we're seeing them in, down to southern Victoria occasionally, like pretty rarely get this far, but, they had a transmitter on one that went through the Middle East. It went to South Africa. So we know that they can migrate between hemispheres, although our birds don't leave our hemisphere at most. Some of them go to New Guinea, but or in Indonesia, the lesser sunders, but yeah, birds can travel amazing distances. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So moving on, what's something simple that, the listeners could do to support birds' conservations or, get more involved and invite birds into their lives more in that sense?
Yeah, well, to plug our own project, our LESS project, because it's aimed at maintaining populations of raptors on the tablelands, I'd like to suggest people report nests of the local raptor species that we mentioned earlier, like the little eagles and sea eagles and square-tailed kites, because there's a few gaps in coverage. I'd love to know about nests north and northwest of Inverell, or between Gyra and Inverell, or between Grand Innes and Inverell, and south of Uralla and Walker. But more generally, for bird conservation, I'd encourage people to join BirdLife Australia. It's sort of the national bird body that's doing a lot of bird conservation and research. You can subscribe annually and become a supporter if you like, and get their publications and keep track of their conservation work. And I'd recommend keeping pet cats confined. I know people like their cats and so on. Just keeping them confined to their own property and not letting them roam and catch our native birds.
Yeah, for sure.
Would be a good move, and not let roaming cats contribute to the feral cat population, by impregnating stray cats and that sort of thing. Just keep your cats on your property. To basically to invite birds into people's lives, I'd suggest just getting out there and watching, just developing a bird-friendly garden, with many layers, with local indigenous trees if you've got space, and shrubs and grass as a ground cover.
Yeah, awesome. And for people who might not be familiar with birds, I know there are apps that I can share for our listeners that if you want to download, I think there's a couple of apps. You might have to pay for them one-off, but I don't think they're expensive. And I personally find them a really great resource in helping ID and, find out what birds are, or obviously there's field guides and books and things too. Yeah, there's definitely a way for just everyday people to learn what birds are. And when you, like the species, and when you mentioned before about reporting nests and things that you would like to know where birds are nesting, how do people do that?
All through local land services. Elliot Picconi at the Armidale office is coordinating the project. I guess people could let me know directly via my email if they want, but go through local land services first, I think. And the other regional offices are aware of the project as well, so they could direct people to Elliot. And of course, LLS has got a website as well. I think there's a facility on the website to at least find the contact details.
Yeah, and this is some really important work. So I will share some information for people to see on how to get involved or report things and be aware of what's going on locally. And then also for people at large who might be outside our area, I'm sure there could be similar things going on that people could get involved with, or, get in touch with their local wildlife services and things, or just be more involved with bird conservation in various ways. I'm sure there's ways people can get involved if you do some Googling or do some research.
Riverina LLS is also running a Black Falcon project too. So that's another one. If people are down that way, they could get involved in that one.
So if people want to feel more connected to our natural world, through birds, for instance, how can observing or learning about birds and raptors be a gateway, like another way people can get involved and get connected?
Well, I think observing what raptors do is a great catalyst, because seeing them capture prey, in their spectacular move is quite exciting. I always get a bit of a thrill from seeing a raptor do something like catch a rabbit or whatever, and learning about them also sort of fosters understanding and appreciation, not just about raptors, but about the workings of the natural world in general. Just getting out there is good.
Yeah, and it would be cool to see it in person. Like, I think it's you can see it in documentaries, obviously, and online, but I think, when you would see it in person, it'd be pretty special to witness.
Yes, there is.
So bird watching would probably be the most obvious way to do this. Just go out and do a bit of bird watching.
Yeah,
And then,
just go out.
yeah. So what sort of natural areas do you sort of look for a specific natural area to look for raptors in general, or just birds, or I guess forest would be an obvious answer?
Yeah, yeah. For raptors, a good place to see them, of course, is elevated positions in the landscape. Where you can get up on a high point, because they're attracted to sort of high points and rugged or undulating topography, because it provides the lift that they like to sort of soar and so on.
Yeah.
I think getting above, or overlooking woodland or forest is good ways to see that sort of forest raptors. Wetlands, you can quite often see raptors around wetlands.
Oh, okay.
But in and around woodland remnants, with a good view of the sky is pretty good for finding raptors and seeing them. And also, that's where all the other woodland birds are, in a good woodland remnant. But well-managed pasture or farmland can produce a lot of sightings too. I mean, you can certainly see raptors in pasture or farmland where there's good ground cover and trees remaining and that sort of thing, and water sources.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I guess going bird watching something anybody can really do, and you just take your bird apps or a field guide and go see what you can find. And then
Binoculars, yeah.
Binoculars definitely need them to get a decent look at the bird, because I've noticed birds, excuse the pun, but they're pretty flighty. They're quite timid when it comes to people, and they just fly away. And it's hard to get a good look at them. Yeah. So on a more spiritual note, just going into this a bit more spiritually, in history, raptors have almost seemed a bit mythical to people, with the sense of being spirit guides or spirit animals, that sort of thing. Why do you think people have, looked to the skies or looked to these big birds for meaning and for signs?
Oh, well, I think it's because raptors, are so sort of awe-inspiring and impressive in their command of the skies. And that's, the majesty of a large eagle or the speed of a falcon and the heights they can reach when they're soaring. And it's their size and strength too, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just impressive, aren't they? Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, well, thanks so much for that, Steve. I think we've probably had a pretty good conversation and covered lots of different things. And if anybody wants to get in contact with Steve, I will post some links, and you can probably look up Steve's work or his research if you want to know more. Or is there much information about this bird project on the local land services page as well, Steve?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there's a Facebook page dedicated to it. It's called Raptors of Northern New South Wales on Facebook. And BirdLife Australia also has a raptor group, a Facebook page. It's a BirdLife Australia Raptor group Facebook page. And there are others. I don't really have a lot of time to get involved too much in Facebook and other sort of socials, but social media. But there are other dedicated raptor and owl Facebook pages that are often focused on photography, but they're there. The name's actually escaping me at the moment, but
there'd definitely be some groups out there people can join. I think I joined one recently. I knew there was one called the New England Birdwatching Group or something. So there's definitely groups and resources out there for people.
Yeah, birding. North New England and Northwest birding or birdwatching or something. Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit of.
Sorry.
No, there's a bit of cross sort of posting between that birdwatching one for New England and the Tablelands Raptor one. Yeah, there's a few posts appear on both, but that's fine. That's good. I think it encourages people to sort of look a bit wider. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And again, for our listeners not in our area, I'm sure there's other resources and similar pages near you if you do a bit of research. So I like to leave everybody with an actionable step at the end of each episode before we wrap up, Steve. Can you think of an actionable step that anybody could do? I mean, one for me I thought of that's quite obvious is for someone to just try a bit of bird watching or planting some bird-friendly plants, native to your area in your garden or in your space. I just thought there were a couple of easy, actionable things that everybody and anybody could try.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are also sort of pretty informal local birdwatching groups too that people can join if they need a bit of guidance. For instance, and there'd be some in other towns and cities, but I know, for instance, for the Armidale birdwatching group, we meet on the first Sunday of the month at the Armidale Visitor Centre at 8:00 and just go to different birdwatching sites each Sunday morning for a few hours and home by lunch usually. And
oh, that's nice. I might come on one of those one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Our nenext one is to one of our Regent Honeyeater sites out on the Guida River near Yarrawick. We don't have much luck finding Regent Honeyeaters and swift parrots there anymore, but we certainly see raptors there sometimes, and it's a good place to go. And we have a monthly program. So yeah, there'll be a bird watching trip on every first Sunday. So that's the next step if people want to actually join other like-minded people, and beginners are welcome, and kids are welcome, and so on. In fact, it'd be good to get the next generation
up and going
involved as well, because a lot of the people that do this sort of social bird watching are actually retired. So it'd be good to see some other people coming through.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on, Steve. We really appreciate your time and hope everybody enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, me too. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Nature's Nexus podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some value in what was shared today. I look forward to presenting more knowledge and sharing ways we can connect to nature in future episodes, and hope you tune in with me to listen, learn, and act. Thank you, and until next time.